Welcome to Divine Justice. In order not to miss the videos prepared by our team, including the latest developments and special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the super thanks button below. Israel has begun to destroy Hamas in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Thousands of Hamas combatants have been arrested in dawn raids by the IDF. Despite this, Hamas continued to launch rocket attacks on Israeli cities from Gaza, while the IDF carried out dramatic ground offensive operations and airstrikes in settlements such as Nativ HaAsara, Erez, Beit Hanun, Nir Am, Sideriot, Kfar Aza, and Be'eri. The Israeli Navy also continued to destroy Hamas targets along the Gaza coastline. Most recently, the IDF announced that dozens of Hamas members who had barricaded buildings and tunnels were killed overnight as the Israeli army continued its ground operations in Gaza. In one incident, an Israeli aircraft guided by Israeli ground troops struck a military position inside a Hamas building containing more than 20 fighters, the IDF said in a statement. Overnight, a guided fighter jet also struck the settlement of Al-Azhar, which IDF troops identified as the site of armed militants and an anti-tank missile launching point. Over the past few days, the IDF said it had struck more than 600 targets, including weapons depots, dozens of anti-tank missile launch sites, and hideouts and staging areas used by Hamas. IDF sources revealed that Israeli troops have advanced more than 2 miles, or about 3 kilometers, into Gaza in the expanding ground operations. The expansion of the Israeli army's ground offensive operations was supported by surprise raid operations organized by the IDF's intelligence teams. The raids, in which Shin Bet and Mossad intelligence officers participated, mainly targeted Hamas fighters trying to reorganize in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Over the past 24 hours, Israeli forces have carried out numerous raids in the West Bank against Hamas. In these raids, the IDF reported arresting hundreds of Hamas members and clashes. The results of the first IDF raid operations were indeed successful. Today, the Israel Defense Forces announced that soldiers captured 46 Hamas fighters during overnight raids in the West Bank. Following this critical operation, Hamas's branch in the West Bank predicted that the IDF's operations would not continue, but the Israeli army increased the frequency of the raids and carried out another operation. With this second operation, the IDF stated that it had dealt a heavy blow to Hamas. Figures that emerged after the operation also proved the IDF's statements. The Israel Defense Forces announced that the soldiers captured 58 Hamas fighters in their second raid in the West Bank during the night. In addition, on the same day, there was a violent clash between the Israel Defense Forces and Hamas combatants in Jenin. It was announced that 110 Hamas fighters were killed during clashes that took place overnight in the Jenin refugee camp of Iser Mohammed al-Amer. Following these clashes, the IDF announced that the head of the Central Command, Major General Yehuda Fox, signed an order to demolish a house belonging to Hamas official Saleh al-Aruri in the town of Aurora near Ramallah. So after all these operations and clashes, Hamas has been hit very hard by Israel. The IDF reported that since the start of the war in the Gaza Strip on October 7th, 1,030 Hamas members have been captured, 660 of whom were part of the leadership and operational staff. In the West Bank, IDF raids were conducted in a very sudden and organized manner. Hamas members had no time to flee or fight back. More than 1,000 Hamas members had no choice but to surrender helplessly in the face of the IDF's power. Thanks to these dramatic steps, the IDF was able to severely hamper Hamas's operations in the West Bank. Hamas has many supporters and sympathizers in the West Bank, so the IDF has to fight a war against Hamas both in Gaza and in the West Bank. It is a well-known fact that Hamas has many supporters also in East Jerusalem, and that these sympathizers carry out activities in this settlement as well. In fact, in the last 24 hours, hundreds of Hamas sympathizers were reportedly arrested in East Jerusalem in Shin Bet raids. In light of all this, Gaza, The West Bank and East Jerusalem are among the settlements where IDF forces must pay the most attention. On the other hand, after the IDF completely cornered Hamas and mostly eliminated the group's leadership, nerves in Iran have been on edge. Iran has been using its proxies to wear down Israel since the beginning of the war. Hamas is allegedly supported by Iran, and Hezbollah is another Iranian proxy in southern Lebanon. However, the IDF is not giving Hezbollah any breathing space in northern Israel. Iran has therefore resumed its unacceptable threats against Israel. Most recently, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi said that Israel has crossed red lines in Gaza and that this could force everyone to take action. President Raisi's comments were not the first time an Iranian official has warned of the potential for a wider conflict. Iranian Foreign Minister Hossein Amir Abdullahian also warned that Israel's bombing of Gaza could have far-reaching consequences, noting that if Israel does not stop its airstrikes, many other fronts are likely to open. Abdullahian also suggested that the United States of America has sent Iran 2 messages regarding the escalation of tensions in the region. According to Minister Abdullahian, the first message from the United States was that it was not interested in expanding the war, while the second message demanded Iran to exercise restraint and insisted that Iran should ask other countries and other parties to exercise restraint as well. But a press conference was held in Tehran without the Iranian foreign minister saying how and when the messages were delivered. Iran's willingness to continue its campaign of attrition against Israel, despite all these U.S. warnings, is indeed having war-escalating effects. War experts believe that Iran is wary of being dragged into an Israel-Hamas war, but that it may not be in full control if it intervenes independently, like the Lebanese paramilitary group Hezbollah, which it supports in the region because of the heavy blows and killings of Hamas. On the other hand, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that the U.S. sees a high risk of clashes spreading in the Middle East as Iranian proxy forces target U.S. troops stationed in the region. There have already been incidents of attacks to substantiate these statements. As you may recall, last week following a series of drone and rocket attacks on U.S. forces, the U.S. launched airstrikes targeting 2 facilities linked to Iranian-backed militias in eastern Syria. The U.S. assessed that there were no casualties in the airstrikes against facilities linked to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and affiliated groups. These strikes were characterized as an intimidation from the U.S. to Iran. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said that if Iran continues to use proxies to carry out attacks in Syria and Iraq, U.S. forces will respond, and Tehran should understand this message. In fact, the message was quite clear. The United States was clearly warning Iran not to escalate the issues in the Middle East. But in the waning days of the war, Iran is unlikely to abandon its attempts to use proxies to attack Israeli and U.S. bases in Israel, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq. Tehran's aim is to weaken Israel while the war rages on and to undermine the peaceful U.S. policy in the Middle East. Therefore, we may see this theater become much more violent and widespread in the coming days. Thank you for watching us. We work day and night to bring you the fastest and most reliable news. In order not to miss the videos prepared by our team, including the latest developments and special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the super thanks button below. See you in our next work.